Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started really quickly. And I'm gonna start by giving you two one of these. So we're gonna use this paper to kind of help guide our meeting today. You will need a pencil or pen. Okay, so today we're doing our 7th grade Unit 6 lesson planning follow-up meeting. And we're doing this meeting for you two because you're new teachers to our program, to our department rather, and we want to try to build capacity within you guys for lesson planning. Because next year, we may not have the same preps. Eventually, you guys will be moving on your own, and then you're gonna need to have this skill. So it's just really important that we build that capacity in you guys. So for this meeting, we are going to use a strategy called Think, Talk, Write. And this is a technique that builds in time for thought and reflection. It helps to organize ideas and testing those ideas before students are expected to write. So we will use this strategy in today's follow-up meeting, and it may also be helpful for you to use it in your classroom, especially when you're thinking about differentiating your instruction. This is normally a strategy that is taught in EB training. So if you go to any ESL or EB trainings, they teach think, speak, think, write, and it's just a way to kind of organize or collect your ideas before a student would have to write it out. So like when students are doing their ECRs or those short written responses, you can do that quick turn and talk really quick, like turn to your partner, have a conversation, and then write independently. So that works. So together today, we are going to consider the following questions. So we have 5 questions that we're gonna think about, and we're gonna use this think, talk, think, write strategy. So I'll read the question. The first thing you're gonna do is think about your response. Then we'll have a moment to kind of talk about that response, and then you guys can record on the sheet. Okay, so number 1, what are 3 TEKs you have covered in your book study lesson?
Like we gotta remember the actual.
So, and not just, you can pull it up. You can even just think about what, like, strategy you're covering or what skill you're covering.
Like paraphrasing information, so that way they can like summarize what's going on in part 1, part 2, part 3, and then they can get an idea of like putting it all together.
Okay.
And remember things, because my kids had a lot of trouble reading through it and remembering what they read. So having them like stop and jot or like write down summaries of what they've read kind of helps a little bit.
Awesome. So then that would be summarizing or paraphrasing. That's going to be 7.6D. Okay, what are a couple of more, Mr. Mendez, you think you've done?
How setting contributes to like the plot to the story. So like in Seraphina's Promise, the fact that they were on an island is why so many like natural disasters like flooding and earthquakes are occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I don't know that one off the top. Look that one up. Don't know that one off the dome. So look that one up. Okay, Ms. Matlock, what are a couple of TEKs that you've covered?
I was trying to find the one I did. I was trying to open up my lesson plans. I did the week before last, but it's one that was about plot elements that we discussed. I had to look it up. I was trying to see the actual TEK number. And then we did 7.9F, where we talk about mood, voice, tone of the main character, how to analyze it and things like that, and how it contributes to the overall story. The other one we did that we started getting into the end of last week is 7.9D about not D. We did do that, but that's not the one. Yeah, 7.5F. Making inferences and use evidence. So they had to type, I had like this Google Doc I sent them, and they had to type using text evidence. So they had adjectives that they felt like Jenna is depressed, or Jenna is confused because her dad got killed and she's kind of conflicted. So they had to, if the adjective is confused, they had to look in that chapter and find an example. So for example, page, they quote that she went to her father's old little storage room and just sat there, and she couldn't decide if she wanted to cry or not. Like, that was an example, and they typed it and everything. But that went with 7.5F, where they make emphasis and use evidence to support.
Awesome. Okay, go ahead and write those tics that you guys have on the first line. So this part is important because when we talk about lesson alignment, sometimes when we're doing novel studies, it's kind of, it could be easy to kind of get away from the focus of the lesson. So if we know what tics we're going to cover, then that kind of helps us align that lesson so that we know that, okay, on this page, I need to stop and really highlight what's going on in this part of the story, because it's going to make a direct connection back to my tic. Okay, so that's why the tics are important. Make sure that you're covering tics, and that helps us know that the book study is aligned. All right, question number 2. What is the primary way your class engages in the novel? Okay, so I want you guys to think about that. When I think about how my class engages with the novel, I think about our reading habits. So I've been using a combination of the text being read aloud, and then I've also had students try to read independently. I don't get as much, the quality of student work when they read independently is very poor compared to when we are reading together as a whole class. Yeah. So I try to, I do have that 4th period class who does well with the independent reading, but my other 2 classes, we just have to do it as a whole group, kind of like tier 1. Just so that I make sure that everyone is engaged, okay? But there are other ways to engage with the novel, okay? So think about some other ways that you guys have engaged. So Ms. Matlock, what is the primary way that your class engages in the novel?
We started out where I read like the first chapter or so, and this is like my honors class, so I just kind of read, and then after that, they've been reading, so like I've mixed it up where one day we might do popcorn class reading where you have to be paying attention, so when that person stops and I call your name randomly, you have to be paying attention, and if you weren't, I'll give you a grace period, let somebody else read, but when I come back to you, you have to pick up, know where we were at. I've done partial, like where maybe the whole class, we start out reading half of a chapter, and maybe the last 2 pages or something, I will stop and let peer, like maybe with partners if you want to, but I give them the option, because I have some students who, if they don't have to, they rather read by themselves, So I give them the option after we do whole class, like, hey, you can get with a peer and y'all take turn reading paragraphs or whatever back and forth, or independent. Either way, we do have days where it's all where you might have to read 2 chapters like independently and things like that. With my honors class, they were doing good, but I noticed that it's not a lot. Out of the 33, it's like 5 of them I'm able to see on these quizzes, because it's comprehension, they have to handwrite or type the response. It's no multiple choice, so that tells me you didn't read. So I had like a couple of them that was mad today and took up the whole class, but the people that already read, they were done with, it was only a 6-question quiz that you had the short constructive response. And out of the 30, most of them have done just like that, but only 5 of them, they were complaining, this is hard, I can't do this. And I'm like, y'all did it before, and it's open book.
And it's open book.
Open book, and the comprehension questions that they've already answered, I didn't grade it yet, so If you did the comprehension questions right, then you already have an idea what to put down and stuff like that. So it's a mixture. So it's open book. And this is their second quiz with me. But you know, the first time we read the first two chapters together, whether it was me or them. So these last go around, they've been reading and they were mad because 5 of them were mad. And I said, so if you read, you would know the answer. That you would have known how Jenna reacted, or you would know how Michael reacted when they was coming looking for investigating about the gun. How do you not know that? Well, I didn't read it. Well, that's your You're in an honest class.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so give you a little bit of feedback about that. So when we talk about engaging students, we talk about what is going to help the student want to participate in the activity. So I think that your idea by using a choice board where you can choose, one day we're gonna read this way, you can choose to read independently if you like. That's really going to help with your student buy-in. So that's a great, so that's a great strategy, and you're already doing that. Like, you're already incorporating that. Kind of that student selection process where students are able to go in and kind of do it on their own. I can also see that you're engaging them by holding them accountable for the reading, because that's one of the big things too. It's like, okay, how are we holding the students accountable? Because 50 minutes is a long time to have a kid with a book.
Yeah.
So then how are we holding them accountable for actually reading the material and not falling asleep or, you know, sneaking and texting and that sort of thing? So you're doing great with that. Okay, Mr. Mendez, what's your primary way?
So for my class, we were having them, I was having them read, like we were all reading together at first, and we had that conversation about them learning to practice reading by themselves. So I did that. It wasn't working as well, so I went back to like us reading as a class, and what I would do to make sure they're paying attention is read a couple pages maybe, or I'd read like 5 to 7 pages, then I'd be like, I would call on somebody, because I told them beforehand, I was like, I'm gonna call on you, and if I call on you, and you don't know what page we're on, I'm gonna just call on somebody else, and you need to at least read 1 time today. So that way everyone was reading, they didn't necessarily have to read right when I called on them. It was just more like a check-in to make sure
Kind of accountability. Yeah.
And so I was doing that with them, and as we went on further in the book, there were some kids who were doing well reading by themselves. So I was letting them continue reading on while I read with a majority of the class that was struggling with independent work. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely good. And that you can think about your differentiation category, right? Because one of the big things is like, well, you have students with 504s, you have students with IEPs, you have students who just are struggling learners. So how are you differentiating that instruction so that everyone is getting a lesson for that day? So you're doing a great job by having students, okay, if you have enough student agency to read and complete on your own, go for that. And then those of you who need the additional help, I'm here to provide the additional help. So those are best practices for sure. Also, the accountability of having students follow along. I actually took a page from that book as well today. I tried to have my students start by writing a summary. We're on chapter 13. And I noticed that many of them were struggling. And so my first thought is like, okay, y'all have not read, haven't read this. And so I went back and I played the audio for that chapter, but I gave 2 rules. 1, if you fall asleep, if you're on your phone, you automatically get a 0 for today. Or if I call on you and you cannot tell me what page number we're on, you also get a 0 for today. And so I had everyone in the first, second period engaged in the reading because there was an accountability factor. So when we think about how we're engaging the students, it's more about that accountability factor. Like, how are we knowing that they are participating, and then how are we holding them accountable for doing that? And you have to think that as the teacher, it's up to us to come up with these clever ways to make sure that we are engaging all of the students, because some of them may need more motivation than the other. You have some of those students who really enjoy reading. They're going to sit there and read that book just for the love of reading. And then you have some kids where it's like, well, if it's not tied to a grade, then, you know, I'm not going to do it. Like, are you going to grade this? You know, and then that's kind of their thing. So that sounds good. Okay, we'll move on to number 3. How do you know students are learning? So we just kind of had this conversation. So how do you know students are learning, or that they are able to perform the learning standard? That kind of is going to go into kind of what we just talked about. But what do you think, Mr. Mendez? How would you determine whether your students are learning?
So like depending on the TEK or just in general?
I would say depending on the TEK, because the class that day should be focused on that learning standard.
Okay, so like my one where I was summarizing, just basically like letting them summarize it by themselves give them 5 or 8 minutes, whatever. And then we come back together, everybody shares something that they wrote down.
Really?
That way they can get like multiple perspectives. Maybe they missed out on something that someone else caught. And then we just kind of wrap it up, and I tell them what I think as well. That way they hear my point of view. And as far as the other one I wrote down was the setting one, that was something I just kept reminding them throughout the story. Where are we at? An island. So there's a lot of water around us. We're right there, like on, like, I guess like the tectonic plates are there, like in the ocean. That's where they meet most of the time.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So all that, like those natural disasters are going to be more likely to occur right there near like a border where the tectonic plates are at. So we're getting all this flooding, we're getting the earthquakes, all that stuff, and it was able to help them picture it a little bit better.
Definitely.
Especially with when they were describing the smells and stuff, like the rest of Haiti compared to that little piece of heaven that they had.
Yeah.
So they were able to like pick up on that stuff.
That's good teaching, Mr. Mendez. Great teaching. Okay, write that down for us.
Okay.
Ms. Matlock, how do you know that your students are learning?
When I do random questions during reading to the class, like if we do whole class and I randomly call somebody or whatever, especially somebody who was playing and they shock me and I'm like, oh, okay.
And they're like, oh, you were listening.
You know, like that really gives me, I'm like, oh, wow. That, and then at the end, I haven't been able to get as many exit tickets as I wanted, but I have done some here or there. At the end, like if we finish the chapter early enough and I pass out something or I have them write in their journals. But the biggest way was like a week ago we were focusing on plot elements and things like that because we were already halfway through. It's a diagram thing you gave me where they sketch and reflect and then they summarize.
Yeah, kind of like that storyboard.
Yes. So I helped with the plot part, the like days before that on the front page, helped with that, but they were able to take and write their own sentences on the back page, like write their own sentences for each, and we broke it down, so like maybe this day you had to summarize what was the exposition in your own words, you had to take a little bit, who's the main character, what's going on, you know, who's the main character, where he live at, what grade he in, stuff like that. Kind of set the scene of the story, what's going on a little bit. Then the next day they went into rising action. Then they did, like they were able to take just a little bit, little nuggets that we put on that and turn on the back into full sentences each day.
That's
so
right.
That helped me know too. How much are they getting? How much are they understanding? Or are they lost? You know, things like that. So I use some of it where if you took good notes, you can do the summarization. So if you jotted some notes, so some people, if they didn't do it or they blank on the other side, they blank. So they trying to re-flip through or try to remember and fill it out the best they can. That helped me a lot. But because we spent a lot of time with the reading, I haven't been able to do as many like exit tickets as I wanted. But so like the next day I may have bell ringers, like it'll be a specific question like from yesterday's chapter.
Okay.
And if you read it, you would be able to answer it. If you were absent, you're gonna have the books are there, so you're gonna have to try to scan or whatever. But you only have 5 minutes. So if you was paying attention, you'll know.
You got it.
So what did he steal at the store yesterday? You know, what did go steal at the store? Something easy, you know, 1 or 2 questions. And why did he steal it? So in 2 complete sentences, you have to answer that. He stole the shoes because he, you know, he's poor and things like that, and he want to have some good track shoes, things like that.
Okay.
So kind of have it like that. The other last one is they have this packet where it has comprehension questions and things like that. So I break it up so they may not answer the questions right away after we read that day. So the next day they'll start, and if you paid attention, and it's like 2 or 3, and you have to write out in sentences. That's the other way as well. It's the comprehension question packet, and that let me know because I look at it and I'm like, you didn't read, you weren't paying attention when we read.
Right.
I read it to you. I did that.
And look, and you still weren't listening.
Yeah.
Okay, so just some feedback on that. One thing that I really like that I heard both of you say is that you are using resources that the English department has provided. So like the turn and talks, the stop and jot, like that's something that you should incorporate, just best practice. I love that you are doing exit tickets, bell ringers, even the comprehension questions that you have in the packet. So again, it's just things like resources that we've used throughout the year, and you guys are able to incorporate those into your own lesson plan, which is going to be important when you start developing that whole plan on your own. Okay, so finally, and we've kind of gotten into this too, what formative or summative assessments have you given? So Ms. Matlock, some of your examples like the exit tickets, the bell ringers, those can be considered formative assessments because we are kind of getting a gauge or kind of a temperature check on where the students are, have they read or not. So those are a couple of ways that you've given formative assessments. What are some, have you done any summatives?
So I've done quizzes, and then I've done like the summative where it's like they had to, and it was one of these documents where they had to answer, and it was for chapter 1 through 5. So that's the whole first half of the book. And they were allowed to have like their comprehension notes, but again, it wasn't graded yet, so that means they're trusting that they took good notes throughout the comprehension package. So I allowed them to have that, and I allowed them to have the book. Some of it was multiple choice for my 6th grade, but 7th grade was no multiple choice. So 7th grade, it was all, now that was my big summative one. I said 1 through 6, I'm thinking ago, sorry, that's 6th grade. 7th grade, it was chapter 1 through 7.
Okay.
So it was the first 7 chapters of the book. So they had to answer, it was 12 questions. And they had to, those that had the laptops, type out everything. And then those that didn't have a laptop, they had to handwrite and fill it out. So, and some of it had where you had to use text evidence, like say page, whatever, site, things like that.
Good idea.
So that one was like my big summative. The quizzes are shorter,
So
but they still have to do short response.
Okay.
Like maybe they were like 5 or 6 questions. But
Good.
those were practice to the big one with the 12 questions over multiple chapters.
And I think that you're getting a lot of buy-in from your students with your comprehension packet, because like you're saying, they have to kind of trust themselves to take good notes because they know that they can use that information when it's time to take an assessment. And so as a student, that would give me buy-in to say, okay, I really need to be doing this because this would have helped me on the summative test or on the quiz or whatnot. So great practices. Make sure you write that information down.
And I keep getting the mix, but Ghost is the 6th grade. Swallowing Stones is my 7th grade.
I got you. All right, Mendez, how are you? What formative or summative assessments have you given?
So similar to her, like I would do exit tickets. Like some would be just basic comprehension. Others would be like inferencing or giving their opinion on topics or situations that are arising in the book. I was giving out quizzes at the end of each part to make sure they're understanding what they just read before they even move on to that second chapter, because it doesn't have chapters, it just has the parts.
Yeah.
And then just graphic organizers all throughout.
Great.
That way they can be writing down information and it's not just a bunch of words on a paper. They know what is being written where. There's like a purpose for where they're writing it at. And then I think that's it.
I think it's really sufficient.
Oh, and then notes, like she said. I let them take notes too, and if they could use it on the test.
Okay.
And then also on the test, the last 10 minutes, if they're working the whole time quietly and I don't have to tell anybody focus, I let them use the book the last 10 minutes.
Okay, nice. Yeah, definitely good best practices. Like I hear best practices from both of you guys. Definitely we want to make sure that we are giving some type of formative assessment each day. Those are your notes, those are your comprehension questions, those are your, okay, we're gonna stop and now we're gonna have a group discussion. That is a form of a formative assessment. So the formative assessments are just those quick check-ins to see, like you're saying, are they understanding what they read before we move on to the next thing. Then you have your summative assessment. That's gonna cover kind of a holistic view of the chapter or of the book. right? There you can start getting into themes that have been expressed. There is where your setting comes in, because that setting is important throughout the entire story. So, your summative assessment is more like this holistic view, or your formative assessment, you can kind of narrow in on either the standard or a skill or strategy that you're trying to teach. All right, finally, do you guys have any additional questions for lesson planning? How did y'all's planning go?
I was doing pretty good. It just takes me a little while. It's not like I can't do very fast, but I'm able to get it done at least.
Okay, yeah, at least you can get it done. That's what's gonna count.
Yeah, it's going good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just takes me too long. I don't like it that it takes me that long.
It is time consuming. One of the things that I think that makes a great teacher is the teacher who is willing to put in the time.
Yeah.
And we know just from our own experience that it is beyond the 8:50 to 4:30 that you're here on the campus.
Yeah.
That it is gonna require some time outside of the contract hours to kind of prepare these lessons and be ready for students when they come into your room each day.
Yeah.
So it's tedious. It can be very tedious, very time consuming, but it is very valuable. Another thing about writing your own lesson plans that are valuable is that they are your plans. So that means that each year you can use that as a template, and then you can adjust as needed, right? So like maybe I'll look at this 6 weeks, I'll look at the unit study, and I'll say, my kids really didn't do well when we did the formative assessment where, they did X, Y, and Z. So then the next time I'm gonna try something different, but you already kind of have that as a baseline or as a template to use to kind of help guide your thinking or kind of help guide you. Okay, so next steps for you guys. I know that you have been working on your own lesson plans. You've been completing your own lesson plans for the last couple of weeks. For this week, you're gonna complete your lesson plan and then upload it to the shared drive.
Okay.
So the next lesson plan that you do, you can either do the one that you've already created for next week, or you can create that one and then just upload that one to the shared drive. And then that'll give me a chance to kind of look through it and then provide you guys with some feedback, just so that I feel, that way you can feel confident in what you're doing, and then I can feel confident knowing that you guys have the tools that you need to be successful with that. But yes, that is where we are. Y'all have any other questions?
How do I figure out their GPAs without having to actually calculate them? Like, is there a little
For 8th grade?
for 7th grade?
For 7th grade, you're gonna have to calculate them.
Like go through and then add all their grades together?
But really it's gonna be for your class.
For ELA?
For ELA, so you're doing it per your subject. So
Okay.
not for the entire grade, because that would be a Miss Penny thing.
Okay.
It'll just be for that subject. So really what you wanna do is look at what kids in your class made the A honor roll.
Yeah.
Like start there and then start kind of backtracking. There's also a printout that Ms. Howard has, and I'll share it with you. It's really like a book almost, but it has every student on the campus, all of their classes, all of their grades for each 6 weeks.
Okay.
So, but I don't want it to be that hard for you guys. So a lot of that GPA stuff we should be passing on to Miss Penny.
Okay.
She should have something that just passes GPAs without doing the calculations.
Do we have to go by GPA, or can we just go by, who maybe they was out on the A on the road?
That's what I'm thinking. That's probably what I would do. Like, I'm gonna look and see, and then if I have, like, let's say I have 2 students and they've been on the A honor roll all 6 weeks or all school year, then I may go in and look at their individual grades and say, okay, who had the highest grade?
Yeah.
Because I know that they both had
That would
A's.
help.
Yeah, definitely. Find any
Cause I was
shortcut.
kind of thinking that in the meeting, that's what I was like.
That's a lot. Yes, find any shortcut you
English
can.
teacher,
I don't know about all this math. Okay, awesome. You guys make sure that, put your last name at the top of the page, and then I'll collect these, and I'm gonna use them in my artifact. Do you need a sticky note, or you want this paper, Mendez?
I'll just take a picture of it real quick.
Okay.
I think I'm already done. I just kind of looked through them real quick.
Yeah, it probably won't take long.
Yeah.
Let me stop this over here. Thank you guys so much for coming up. I appreciate it.